Alright, 1749 rolls in. Another remix event, which got rid of some kind of cool events some people had or had drawn. They were hoping to use in the upcoming piece. But no such luck. And, well, yeah, just debating the French, whether they want to blow the points or... The English don't, and here's the problem. The Prussians are kind of putting some form of pressure on France, saying, you know, I'm kind of actually in favor of this war against Spain, because I have 635, Spain has 659, England has 635. I don't think I'm going to catch Holland. I don't think I can. But I might be able to catch Spain and pass England as well. So that's kind of appealing. But on the other hand, France is like, well, you're the one who has to pay for it. If you want it right now. If you're so interested in it. And unfortunately, the Prussians don't even have a casus belli against Spain. France is kind of saying, well, I'll wait until there is one. There's a frontier one in Russia's hands, but they're not terribly worried about any of this. Russia has only 588. There isn't much they can pass. Turkey is really their worry, and they want a peace phase so they can hit Turkey again. Maybe try to even this out a little bit again. Because that's really the person they're looking at passing. Poland is also a possibility at 607. I'm not going to... So, the construction of the turn means that the Turks could sue for peace, and then the Russians would have the ability to declare war on Poland. The problem with Poland, of course, is they're part of this big alliance, I believe, with Prussia and France and Holland. We would rather at least see that big alliance involved in a war somewhere else before we get them pulled into our war, essentially. So, not sure what we're seeing there. The English have to contemplate the possibility of an alliance with Spain. The problem with that, of course, is Spain is doing better than them. This is a game where you're not driven by your geopolitical situation, you're driven by a victory point chart. Sometimes that can work out okay, but in most games that use it, including EU, including Empires and Arms, it really distorts the game. And you'll see that in any of these games that kind of allow you a free opportunity to do things. It's one of the things that I kind of like about the Here I Stand Virgin Queen game design, which is, you know, you don't have some running total of points you're keeping. Your geopolitical situation is reflected in your victory points. And those games kind of instill this, you're trying to stop someone from reaching a dominant position. Machiavelli's the same way. This glory point system it doesn't capture what I think are the real reasons for war in general. And even when you throw events in like EU has, which help spark the wars and maybe give you some incentive towards the war, they don't give you that right feel for why the wars are happening. To some extent, you might avoid a war that all of the event kind of pushes you towards, just because, you know, I'm not really that worried about that guy, and I think I can get as many points off a good war with someone else if I can find someone to fuel it. Maybe the guy I'm going to pick on will become my ally instead in that war. I don't think this system works terribly well. And that's not just this game. There's a whole family of these games that are driven not by the board positioning, not by the events that are happening on the game, but by this, well, how well have you done throughout the game? In their own way, it's one of the things that's wrong with History of the World up there, which is a very different, much lighter game, but, you know, Rome goes marching into India. I've said this before here. Just because, hey, this player has the lead right now and I want to slap him down. Maybe the 2 power per player design will help that. I don't know. I'm not sure how much. Anyway, for the commerce, we had an increased price, Chet, which ended up meaning that lots and lots of money was made. Everybody paid out triple, and essentially that's the same as if everybody pays out double. And Holland's doing fine over there. And the piece was a fairly simple one. 3 requirements. One of them was the big prestige one. That's big enough to send Russia to the top of the prestige chart and Turkey to the bottom. Well, along with the other demand, which was the minor financial. The minor financial is not going to be that much money, although Turkey might have trouble meeting it anyhow. It's $14 by 52. They don't have a big army though, so it won't be too painful. One of the nice things, that huge feudal army disappears when it's time to pay reparations, assuming that Austria doesn't come slamming into them. But again, Austria doesn't think that they have a chance to win, and they don't really feel like they have the army to win with either at this point. They're just too weakened. It puts Russia at the top of the line. They'll score some good points, especially against Turkey, but against everyone really. And we're not seeing any other diplomacy. England not willing to go help Spain, not able to find any real help. Prussia's just as interested in hitting Spain or England as they are in hitting the English. When we see the 7 Years' War event, my guess is that, like the Austrian succession event, it's going to be hardwired in to where the powers are. I don't think that's a good idea, but that's where I've decided to go with my playing this time. I don't think I'd ever tinker with the idea of the Grand Campaign again. The only thing that I'm worried about is the whole, how balanced is the whole victory point thing. In a 10-player game, I don't think it can be. In fact, in anything but a 5-player game, I don't think it can be, simply because, and I'm not sure how well that's handled, but we haven't tried it. But I don't think that can be terribly well balanced either, just because of the pairings. My hope had been the freedom of diplomacy, etc., which is the bright side of a system like this with the prestige, is that everybody's got these piles of points. As long as they're somewhat near each other, as long as everyone's got some opportunity to gain them, it seemed like power politics at the table would help determine what the alliances are going to be. But not the power politics, the victory point politics. Okay, good, bad, I don't know. Obviously, I have my grumps about that, but you do see games where, so-and-so's ahead, and it works very, very well in Here I Stand. So-and-so is going to win if I don't move in, or in the coin series as well, where they're these tightly balanced games where everybody has this ability to move in. I was hoping for that here, as opposed to the EU type of idea. Without the external events, which really kind of, if those aren't vaguely balanced, the game's not going to be balanced. I thought this had a good chance of it, but it does have this huge unbalancing factor, at least on the individual country side, with the merchants. The merchants have too many advantages. And when you look at the end of the Grand Campaign victory conditions, they end up being the Spanish Succession War conditions, which doesn't seem quite right. Things like Hanover haven't been inherited yet, so it's not expected there. There's some places where it works very well. The Franco-Spanish border largely works okay. But it doesn't really work so well in the East. The big gains against Poland, not expected here. But likewise, Poland isn't expected, it doesn't get points for holding her own. She can sit the whole game and do very well compared to the historical situation, yet not do much and thereby lose because she's not active. And Poland historically was not active, and there are some serious weights around her legs in this game. What if this was all the pairs? That's so hard to say. Yeah. I mean, I keep looking at them. England and Turkey. Turkey could be very valuable. England is very valuable, no matter what, right? Even in the game that we're playing, where they've been kind of hosed in terms of the merchants, in comparison to the Dutch, they're still doing pretty well. Austria and Sweden. That sounds like a loser combination to me. Austria historically did well enough, but I don't feel like they get the advantages necessary there. Russia and Holland. Well, this is going to be pretty good. Russia is actually in the top tier right now. Prussia and Spain. That could be fairly good too. It's going to be tougher for Spain to get a good merchant score, but they can probably bank a point each turn. France and Poland. France can do very well. Poland's not likely to get you much points though. So, I don't know that there's much hope that this is inherently balanced, and it seems pretty clear that the runaway points of the merchants, where they can be powerful, can be quite big. Whoever wins the merchant war is going to have a huge advantage, and the merchant war right now has been won by Holland. I don't see that coming out of their hands at any point. Well, there's really only one other country that I think has a good chance of taking it away from them, which is the Brits. France and Spain have slight opportunities too. Sweden is barely a mercantile power. They just don't have very many counters. They have a reasonable amount, and then when we start looking at the other powers, they're out. Now, who was Sweden's buddy? It was Austria, right? Austria is not going to become a mercantile power. They don't have a port even, unless they give Venice that they could tax to make themselves one. All right, we push into 1750. I think I pretty much ran through the turn. And I'm sort of cheating in the sense that I've decided not to pay too much attention to counting up all the troops on the board. That's too much of a pain in the ass. If I can remember and make a guesstimate, as long as we're not talking about a difficult situation. So for example, Sweden, Austria, these countries are right at the edge. Some others, Russia, Turkey, just got out of a war. Things are very different for them. They're not in a stable point. But I can kind of remember how much I pay each turn for them. I may be completely wrong, by a buck or two, right? I may be a little wrong off of how many troops they have on the board that I'm paying for. It's just not worth worrying about, Maybe France doesn't get to build an extra unit that I think they do. Or more with certain countries, England, Holland, Prussia, Poland. It just doesn't matter. They're just collecting up money, some of which disappears at the end of each turn. There's nothing they can do with that money. Anyway, we're going into a peace phase here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to assess the victory points for the Austrian Succession War here, because it's supposed to end in 53 anyway. And unless this is a particularly long or a particularly short peace turn, it doesn't make sense to assess this. It's going to be at the end of next turn or the beginning of this turn. Or the beginning of next turn. It's hard to tell which one's which when you start making up rules like I have here. How do you want to judge it? Well, right now it's easiest just to score that. Alrighty. Ended up with our bonuses here. Russia got points for the Crimea. France for installing a Bavarian on the empire. That was worth 5 points only. Prussia, 10 points for grabbing Silesia. By the way, the French need the Prussians to own Silesia as well to get their points. Spain got for all the territories they've still held on to. And Turkey for holding on to a hunk of, an important hunk of Hungary. They have either of these, they get 10 points for that. Kind of sweet. Nowhere near what Holland is. No one's up there. That's at 738. But we do see the Spanish cranking out points, looking like a strong second right now. And Prussia having passed England by 10 points. And then our others above 600 are Russia and Turkey. Everyone else is kind of lagging far behind. It's going to be hard for any of those powers to do well. We're talking things like Austria, Poland, Sweden. They're in decline right now, and they're not going to have an easy job of turning that around. Even if they've got an ally, a buddy who can help bring them back on their feet in terms of prestige points, it's going to be pretty tough. You know, Poland, for example, could recover if someone helped them regain Russian territory. Who wants to do that? Well, there's people who don't like Russia because of the points they're gathering. But who really cares? Does Prussia care that much at this point? Russia's a good 50 points behind them. Unless Russia's able to really start cranking points, they're probably pretty safe to allow us sit there. And, you know, Sweden has a big, decent army. Well, a reasonably big, decent army. But they have a hard time getting it anywhere. So they kind of like... Sweden's one of the few countries that really likes the idea of the peace to war transition, because without that, they have to prepare for the war. They have to kind of use a war turn to get their troops into place anyway, because they're just so isolated here that they have to do these naval transports. And in fact, the one turn for the peace to war probably isn't even enough for them. Anyway, I am not going to do the 7 Years' War scenario starting now. It's going to perhaps come in at the start of this next turn. Unless it's a short scenario, we could just bypass it completely, like we did with the Polish succession crisis. And I'm fine with that. I think that's the best way to handle that kind of circumstance. Again, though, you know, I'm just making these things up because I would not suggest trying to play with the kind of fitting the events to the time period the way that I have here. There are some flaws to not doing so, but I think there's just too much. Whoa! I got some points I didn't allocate. The Russians are fine, but the Turks should have 4 more points because they regained this from the people. Okay, events phase. We had the American Revolution actually happen this time. Now, this isn't nicely spelled out. So it can only happen during peace. Springs up some forces here. The U.S. wins if they ever control all 3 of them at the same time. Well, they do immediately, so obviously that can't be the case. I'm not sure what to do with that. It doesn't automatically trigger a war. I'm not sure what to do with the revolution if nobody starts a war turn on the next turn. I'm going to have to kind of wing this one, as with much. So, if the Americans win, the French Revolution becomes more likely. I don't have the rule as to where the French Revolution is. It's not an event. It, I think, is in the annexes, and I don't know. But I'll have to look that up because we're getting close. All the countries that have trading fleets have a casus belli against, if I can find it, yeah, Any power with a war navy and a trading company receives a free casus belli against England. Right now that's Spain, who certainly doesn't want to take it. And the Dutch, who don't terribly want to take it either, because they can't force their allies into it. Which may mean that the English are going to get to crush this without a problem. They don't want to declare war on the Dutch, although they wanted to before, for the simple fact that they don't want to enter into two wars at once, and they also don't have any allies here right now. They needed to form an alliance to handle the Dutch. Maybe with someone like Prussia, and they're having a lot of trouble getting their hands on Prussia. Although, to tell you the truth, the French kind of don't want to start a war without a jet, as I noted for prior reasons. Now, there's victory conditions at the end of the game, which mean the French kind of want to get their ass in gear and take some of that Spanish territory, because they get a multiplier to their victory. In some cases, it's fairly significant. So each territory that you own gives you additional percentage points to your victory conditions. Unlike something like EU, where there's just a bonus at the end for owning certain territories, here everything you own is assessed at a certain bonus percentage, and anything you don't own that you probably should have owned is assessed with a negative percentage, which works kind of nicely because, I guess, I don't know, because it does give some capability of doing a big hit on someone at the end of the game if they're strong in terms of victory points, I guess. I'm not sure. It doesn't look like it's going to be significant to make a huge difference, like take Holland down because they lost Zealand, even though that's half their country, right? And they get a big bonus off their huge trading fleets. So if no one's going to declare war, and I'm not sure that's the case, I don't know what to do. I think what I'll do is I'll play the next turn out as a peace turn. I just don't know. Do you assume the British can crush the revolution no matter what? Or do they have, do they enter a special little military series of turns? Maybe it's best just to assume that this is a war with a minor country, because in a sense it becomes a minor country if it gets out of the war. Again, not covered well enough in the rules to handle, to give a good understanding. Alright, I can't figure out this new camera, so I'm just not sure that I'm where I'm supposed to be, because I can't replay things. Anyway, what do we got here? Did the commercial phase. Things were a little more exciting than they have been, with the higher income, and Spain having added a ship last turn but not been able to place it yet, means that since they lost a number of competitions, they actually weren't able to make their triple value while everyone else was. So they had to make a check, and they actually only stood still in terms of prestige, while the English and, of course, the Dutch both gained 2. The English gained 2 because they paid double and they beat a larger structure. And you'll also see both the Dutch and English have piles of cash left over. Remember, the Dutch can't reinvest theirs. So their company kind of is able to maintain that triple payments, I think, better than most, because they're not trying to push their shipping to a larger level. With the others, you see that attempt. Now, when the privateering happens, they have to pay $3 a fleet that they lose. Now, we're hitting into the diplomacy, and like I said, I'm not going to take the 7 Years' War into effect yet. Although, there might be a good reason to do so. Giving basically the initial status, the only thing it really does is gives Austria and Prussia a free casus belli against each other. And neither one terribly wants to use it, although the Austrians would like to get Silesia back. They don't have the kind of alliance to force that. France is the country with the biggest desire towards attacking Spain. Right now, though, I think what's going to happen is the English are going to try to put down the American Revolution. No one is particularly interested in fighting with England, and I don't think anybody else is terribly interested in pursuing one of their plans here. Now, this is a peace turn. There's no conflict in a peace turn, so it all kind of gets mushed together. But I think this is going to create a war with a minor, I guess. I don't know. Twice now, my damn Deverio browser for the computer has made me put together multiple videos at once. I can't control what I'm outputting there, so I'm going back to low definition for these for the most part, because I just can't get the hang of that thing. I mean, I noticed I put a 4-hour video up this time. It's like, I don't know how many are pieced together. I think the last oversized one and this last one, I don't know. It's bigger than it should be. I can't find all the stuff and delete it. It's clogging up my computer because it's putting shit where I can't find it and get rid of it. I can't delete stuff from the browser itself. It's ridiculous. I can't delete stuff on the camera directly without going the old way into the file system and deleting it. Anyway, the diplomacy state was kind of interesting in this turn. Remember, it's a peace turn. Well, that shakes up some of the minors. And Bavaria and Denmark were shook loose. Both are powerful. Bavaria, not just because it's got a decent army, but also it's the emperor. And therefore actually has the Reich brigade as well. A lot of people had a lot of cash sitting around, and a lot of them spent big. Holland, England, and Prussia all spent over $10 on Denmark, and Poland spent $6 on Bavaria, which got them a shot at that. What we ended up seeing, Bavaria didn't go to anyone. It didn't align to anyone. Poland failed their roll by 1 point. Even though they had a +2 on Bavaria, they still have to roll at least a 10. But the English ended up getting Denmark, which changes some of the dynamics. They're still not powerful enough to take on Holland when Holland's got France as a buddy without some sort of alliance. And everybody is a little reticent about taking on France. France is potent. But of course, France didn't declare war on Spain, which would have maybe changed the attitude somewhere. You know, a Spanish, Prussian, English alliance could certainly hold its own against France. Right now, though, Prussia's allied with France. Anyway, all we've got is the American war, and it's not in place yet. Right? Whatever happens in a peace turn doesn't really happen. It sets the stage for the next turn. So we'll just be going on to, I guess, our economics. And the English put a large army down in New Orleans with the intention of winning the colonial war without anybody intervening in it, and nobody took their free casus belli for it. There's not a lot going to happen there. We are in 1758, though. As far as I'm concerned, we've entered the era when we could deal with the Prussian succession, the 7 Years' War here, sorry. That's supposed to start in 56. Essentially, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give a one-turn only free casus belli to either Austria or Prussia, well, to both of them, against the other. Now, if they can't form some sort of alliance to have that work out, nothing's going to boil over on this. And there's a big question there. I think England's even decided that Holland's out of reach at this point. Everybody's more or less conceded Holland's going to win this game. The English have seen other countries pulling ahead of them. In particular, they're at 667 here. They're seeing Prussia at 675, Spain at 699. They're not terribly interested in the situation with Holland. Holland's up in the 700, 758 there. They're just outside of everyone's reach. How's Russia? Russia's at 6:30. That's not really a problem. But basically, with Prussia and Spain, England's got this problem where they can't really intervene against either of them. But on the other hand, nobody's as terribly worried about coming in against the English down here in the Americas. They're probably going to have a free hand to get that. That gets them like an extra 10%, I think, if they can keep that. That's a pretty hefty bonus. Some of these other countries, though, have some big bonuses, too. Damned if I can find them all. They're going to be in the victory point phase, section 28. So yes, I can find them. I just have to flip through this. And by the way, I may have lost the last video. If YouTube can't fix it, if they can't process the 4-hour video that I uploaded, I don't know what I can do, because I've got this chunk of something I can't look at that I created in the Averio browser. And I can only look at it in Averio. I can't look at it anywhere else. I also have a big chunk. I have the video itself sitting in a waveform, which I guess maybe I could cut that down. If it's all put together correctly. God knows. But that's it. I mean, I'm done with that shit. Okay, let's see. Here's what we have here. Oh, we're in the revolution check. At the end of each general peace phase. Okay, we roll a die. The United States doesn't exist. France has not just suffered a bankruptcy. We need a 20, I guess, or a 19 or something. There could be a French Revolution happening here. Okay. When does the game end? When the French Revolution happens. So we could end at any point. So let's see. We've got gaining provinces gives you a bonus. Losing provinces that you should have within your national borders. Hereditary provinces outside of, well, in or outside. England and Holland, if a power with a commercial fleet owns Flanders. Well, right now that's the case. Spain owns Flanders, so they're going to get a penalty based on the commercial power of Spain. As far as I can tell, the way the game's written, the way the rule is written, if they held it themselves, they would get a penalty. I would say that's unreasonable, so that could be a reasonable war aim for the Dutch. I don't know if they have a claim to it, though. Colonial dots that you own on other people are worth a good percentage here. Your national company structure is worth a decent percentage. Your Navy structure is worth some. England crushing the American Revolution, that's worth 10%. So that's a good 70 points right there that they can get, that no one else can touch. That probably is enough to put them not in Holland range, but above everyone else. So there is some worry there. And Austria and Spain, Austria and France have the option. They have a plus 10% as well if they got the Spanish succession. Well, the Austrians got it. They lost the imperial succession, though. So that's an extra 50 points, say, for them. That's not enough to do them much good. They've been hosed for too long. All right. So we'll be starting this in a war in 1758, and we'll see if anybody wants to shake things up based on what we see there. No one really took advantage of the possibility of declaring war on England for free due to the revolution. So, and that seems a little screwy that, like, the pre-revolution eras when you have to set up that war if you want a continental war over it. And it would be a continental war, which is also kind of weird. Bit of a shake-up with the merchants because the English no longer have an absolute monopoly here. They shifted things around. The Dutch and Spanish went in there. The Spanish are having a hard time here. They're basically breaking even on their economics here because, for the same reason as last time, they're not making as much as the English are. The English have been able to pay the triple. The Spanish have not. And there's always a chance, because the Dutch are also paying the triple, and there's a chance of the high competition in place. There's another way competition can happen. What was that? Oh, I know. There's another way to lose shipping is if you don't pay any if you don't pay off your base amount. But nobody's in that kind of issue. It's just too easy to make money in this market right now. It's not tightly constrained the way it was. Now we come to the diplomacy, and this is where everything gets tough. I'm really having trouble. The Russians, for example, have a casus belli. They want to use it against Poland, but they're afraid of Prussia coming in on Poland's side. And they kind of want to play out and watch how this turn goes before forcing a war, because, if Prussia does something, and they might, or France does something, it could put us in a better position vis-a-vis Poland. And even if we are going to face the Prussian army, which we may, what we want to do is we want to make sure we have most of the Russian army in the field. Right now we don't. And if we're facing, say, Prussia and Poland together, that's going to be painful. We're not going to really be able to get the kind of grasp in the war that we want. Now, we could turn it against Turkey. We had a peace turn over there. I'm feeling this kind of weirdness about, the starting state for my special scenario conditions that I'm putting into play. Just, hey, this one's starting after the 7 Years' War started, and I don't have that peace period just before it. I really, if I was worried about trying to make this game work under that scenario situation, I would be more upset about it, because I would have to try to figure out, okay, maybe 5 years before the start of the scenario, before the normal start of the scenario, we'd trigger that kind of event if a turn is peace starting there or whatever. Some kind of special rule to try to handle that. But, I don't think that's the way to go with the game. I think the way to go is as written, not worry about the individual scenario situations. I think you get a good enough flow of the history. The problem is you don't get kind of the specific interests given at individual times, and that, along with the fact that, hey, victory conditions over the course of the game are different. But to tell you the truth, the individual scenario victory conditions, I don't think apply the grand campaign overall victory conditions of, so for example, having the biggest merchant fleet would get you that plus 10% to your victory points or whatever. I don't think that applies. I'm not sure. Anyway, automatically nothing came out of the turn. I just have too many disincentives for fighting. Among them, a weariness of the game, perhaps foremost among them. But it's tough, When you're, when I first faced EU, I definitely looked. I was more askance towards joining wars. I still am, but I was more directed by the events, etc. So until you really have a full grasp of what the victory plays out as and really understand it, it's tough to say, yeah, it's clear that I should make a war here. So for example, France, well, I'd be spending 3 of my prestige, which is 3 victory points right off, and maybe more down the road, for something that maybe I'll win the war, maybe I won't. If I do win the war, maybe I can put it off a little bit until there's a chit available that I can take them on. Other countries, Russia's still not prepared for war. Most of the rest, uninterested really in pushing the issue. The English are getting away for free, and they're probably going to end up taking the Americas back. I don't see a way around that unless a foreign government intervenes. They just have too big a pile here. Now, what they don't have, I think, is Wolf. I don't know when the hell he comes in. Next turn. So they don't have a general they can use out there, which means there's some advantage because Washington's pretty decent but he's got to be revealed, and he might be wiped out in that revelation. I guess there's also a militia present in each of those spaces. I don't know. I haven't been able to find the rules on the militia yet. Just suggestions that there is one. All right. Anyway, without any other wars, the English, I guess, are going forward with their war with the U.S. And we'll see if they can take it all out at once. We're back in peace next turn. Let's see what we got here. The Brits marched in from New Orleans into Charleston, and the U.S. withdrew. Up here in Boston, the invasion was successful. Now, an invasion is no different from any other combat, except if you lose, you have to get back on your boats and go home. And going home in this case meant all the way back to Britain. Then we had Washington march up from the New York space, up into Boston. And he managed to defeat the Brits. However, he only has one unit left. That means, well, I think it means the Brits are not going to get a chance to do anything unless they do a naval invasion from here, which is what they're going to have to do. They want to knock it out all at once. If they don't knock it out all at once, it gives another turn. And you know what? I'm going to give the free casus belli to exist as long as the Americas are in revolt. I think that's the only fair way to do it. If anybody really wants to jump in against the Brits, they can. Of course, it's only the people who have shipping, I think, who get a casus belli, although maybe France does too because they have a colony nearby. I got to look that up. But, you know, if the English can finish it off, they're going to do it. All right, well, the English were successful. There just aren't enough American troops. Basically, the English Navy is capable of shipping most of the English army into place there. And as long as there's no threat from anywhere else, I don't see how they can be stopped. I'm going to call next turn a peace turn. I'm not sure it should be or not, right? Because officially the war would normally, the peace treaty would be signed next turn, but there's no America left, right? So again, shooting in the dark with this one, but that'll speed up the end of the game. And you know, I mean, other countries are kind of waiting for a peace turn. Some of these countries really want to be able to try to get rid of some of their debt, although getting rid of it at this point, this late in the game, may be silly. Because quite honestly, for example, Austria took a big dip in their prestige. They're getting less victory points. We got more people breaking the 700 barrier there. Spain's at 714. We got a 690 for Prussia. Only 684 for England. But England's got a lot of points in the bank because of the Americas. Like I said, that's another 70 points. I don't know how many percentage points Prussia's going to get. And I'd rather kind of play blind rather than try to figure out and do too much analysis on things. I'm too prone to doing that, like in Empires in Arms, figuring out, you know, because of the initial bid, just how much you can get away with Russia without ever having to go to war, really, with a major power. Just, you know, hey, I think I can pick off Sweden and maybe this, you know. And then I should be able to coast to a pretty good victory by the end of, you know, by around 1814, using my manpower. So depending on how you decide to interpret the victory rolls, you know, I can pretty much assure that I'll get a victory as long as there is no war, and then play for the peaceful game unless someone forces it differently. All right, well, that is the end of 58. Not much happened, obviously. Well, I did something maybe I should have, shouldn't have, I'm not sure. I looked at the end of era victory conditions and ended up scoring those as well. The reason not to is because Russia has specific little victory condition during the reign of Elizabeth. If they can take Berlin, they get like an extra 5 or 10 points. I'm holding off on the decision on that, but to me, all the events around the 7 Years' War have ended. However, if some sort of circumstance rises where the Russians can get to Berlin during Elizabeth's reign, I'm going to give them a special 5 or 10-point bonus, whatever it is. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it as it is. Now, chances are that reign is going to end in this turn, this being a peace turn. But it is possible it could be a short turn and she could stay on the throne. Event-wise, we had decreased commerce, which shook things up quite a bit. England wasn't able to make her triple payment. Neither was Spain, for that matter, which I forgot to roll for. England wasn't even able to make her double payment. So Spain is the only... Holland went up 2. Spain went up 1 for the double payment, but she's bigger than England. So she doesn't get the bonus this time of beating out the English merchants, as it were. So, that's where we are with that. And now we fall into the diplomacy phase. Still, I don't think anybody has... The French have a casus belli commerce, which they would be willing to trade to someone if they're interested, like England. However, the Russian frontier one... Still not seeing anything except, hey, I could go beat up on the Turks. I really want to hit the Poles. I want a war to happen. I think we're still not going to see anything going on. The Swedes have an inheritance, though. They have a shot at getting Denmark here. We'll see if they get that. Indeed, they do, and that gives them a kind of nice situation. They have now an income of 11.5. They don't have a huge debt, just the $5. That's only going to cost them 1. They can probably get the Danish army built slowly with this money. It strips Denmark away from England. How valuable is any of this? Well, again, Sweden is far behind in the victory point race at 536. I feel like I need to have someone else in there. I'm not going to go throwing myself at Russia. And this is kind of the problem, is a lot of the people just aren't able to come to a real clear decision of, yes, it's in my best interest to make this attack. The alliance that's formed, France, Prussia, Poland, is just so ugly. And Holland. It's just so ugly in terms of preventing warfare. You know, Russia doesn't want to end up at war with all of them. And here's the honest thing. Let's say Russia does go to war with Poland and these others come in. It's not really to their disadvantage to be in that war. Even if they maybe don't have a huge goal in mind from it, they can probably score quite a few points off Russia. Russia's probably not got a great army. It's going to be somewhat polluted with these feudal corps. So it's a tough call to say, yeah, we want to go to war, especially without a casus belli. Russia herself not doing that badly. At 651, not great. A lot of territory. Kind of don't want to risk it against, if I go to war with Poland and Prussia comes in and they defeat me, Poland may strip a lot of that territory away from me. It's just really hard to pull the trigger on a war when you know it's right at the end and you won't be able to recover from it. Key little factor to it is there's no assurance if you declare war that other people will come in with you, unless you can get them to agree to, and even then it's kind of iffy. If you're declared war on, you can call your allies, but unlike most of the games of this nature, EU, for example, if somebody calls an ally, then you can call allies as the attacker. There's no provision like that I've seen in this. And I think EIA has similar things. So it's like, you have to be pretty sure that you can handle that alliance that you're facing alone. and you don't even know necessarily what it is. And we push our way in to 1769. The Revolution check failed. Not surprisingly, there's no bonus to it because there's no Americans. And, calm peace turn. A lot of countries trying to reduce their debt a little bit, hoping to get a chit to make this last period. And it is the last period. It's the Confederation of the Bar event. I can probably read it just because I'm used to the way these are written now. But I may wait until my wife and I can look at it. What I'm realizing is I haven't been paying attention to the addition of artillery. It's not that big a deal. It really isn't. But there's some artillery that hasn't made it into the game yet. And I think it probably did in 1750. Maybe at an earlier date. Anyway, we should be pretty much at the end. All the artillery should be in the game pretty soon, if not. Otherwise, it gives some countries like Poland or something a possibility to use their money. Poland has, not a great economy, but basically they don't have much army. So they run out of cash real quick. And larger artillery means that your prime army, has more of a bonus if it's facing a split up artillery of another country. Of course, countries like France and Russia are going to have more artillery overall, so they can split their artillery among the stacks anyway. Anyhow, I guess we can send this one up. I was kind of hoping it would end here. But that's not to be, and I suspect we're going to see at least one more big blast if the event gives any additional casus belli. But it is real hard to convince myself to go forward with the declarations. Countries like England, for example, I'm not that far behind the Dutch. If I can knock them down a bit and hold on to what I have, I won't be in too bad a shape. But the alliance interlocking the way it is, it's scary to do it. And I haven't bothered to make the alliance with Spain because they're also ahead of me. Now, can I surpass Spain? Shit, I don't know. I don't want to pre-calculate, as I said. And the nature, though, of the decision-making as to which alliance you're going to take all seems so false. Now, what if it wasn't a running victory point situation? Then, obviously that wouldn't be a big deal. But no matter what, if you've got this running built-up victory points, you can tell who your competition is, and you don't want to ally with them, no matter what the situation, strategically is. All right, this one's going up, and the hell with the Vario. We're going to get... I'll probably end up doing it high def anyway, just because I'm going to sleep soon.